We're live.
Well, happy spring, everyone, and happy Poetry Month, the month of April. T.S. Eliot said, April is the cruelest month, but not for poetry. Here we are gathered here on this Easter Sunday, and with best wishes to all of you celebrating this holiday, as well as those of you who have been hosting your Passover Seders over the past few weeks. It's just incredibly heartwarming to join all of you and welcome you today to our edition of Cultivating Voices live poetry for our inaugural, what we're calling our Poets Focus, today on the theme of bloom. Well, I'm your host, Sandra Yannone. I'm the author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry. And I'm joining you today from the Pacific time zone in Olympia, Washington, in my kitchen. And I want to say a big shout out to those of you here with us live in our Zoom poetry studio, and those of you watching us live on Facebook and soon YouTube. Just a very, very warm welcome to all of you on this Sunday. Well, today it is I'm overflowing with like just joy. I'm like really giddy. I'm almost like what my grandmother would call punch drunk on the flowers. I don't know if it's the flowers or the poetry or all of it. For today's poetry reading, as I said, where we're going to reflect on the theme of bloom in a variety of ways. Our 5 features, we've curated them for various reasons to reflect on that theme of bloom, and we'll be followed by a live open mic on the same theme. It'll be really great to see how this all crystallizes together to create this really interesting bouquet of poetry today. Well, before I introduce today's featured poets, a little bit about Cultivating Voices live poetry. We held our first reading on March 29th, 2020. Last week, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and we started this endeavor, thank you, Charles, in response to the shutdowns of in-person venues and everywhere. And we've now developed into an international, intersectional, intergenerational reading series and poetry community with over 2,500 members worldwide. We alternate weekly readings between our ever popular new book showcase and our Poets Focus, which we're doing today. And occasionally we have a special event like our upcoming Sunday special in 2 weeks with Slappering Hall Press celebrating its 30th anniversary. Incredible chapbook press. We're so glad to be able to feature and honor the work of the editors at Slappering Hall Press, bringing chapbooks alive. And so we'll be bringing them live to you in 2 weeks. Well, now to today's poets. I'll introduce each one before they read, and then I'll return with our live open mic. Well, our first featured poet today in Bloom, I wouldn't have even held a Bloom reading if I was not able, if this individual was not able to be here with us today. So I'm very, very glad that Charles Flowers, editor of Bloom, is with us today. I have so admired the work that Charles has done in support of the LGBTQ plus communities through Bloom and through his work with Lambda Literary. And I will now share the more formal bio of Charles Flowers, whom I should also add was one of our featured readers in our Laureate Love Fest in February. So really glad to extend the love from February through to today. Well, Charles Flowers graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Vanderbilt University and received an MFA in poetry from the University of Oregon. His poems have appeared in Gulf Coast, Barrow Street, Indiana Review, and Puerto del Sol. Flowers is the founding editor, as I mentioned, of Bloom, a journal for lesbian and gay writing that Edmund White has called, quote, the most exciting new queer literary publication to emerge in years. I get chills saying it because I know it to be absolutely true. Charles is a former executive director of the Lambda Literary Foundation, the country's leading literary organization for LGBTQ writers and readers. Charles has also worked as an associate director at the Academy of American Poets and as deputy director of development, the ACLU Southern California. That's American Civil Liberties Union, for those of you not in the know. His book, The Idea of Him, was published by Midsummer Night's Press in June of 2020. Would you please give a warm Bloom welcome to Charles Flowers?
Hi, I was clapping for Sandy's introductions because they are so warm and so authentic. And it's just, you know, when the Grinch Stole Christmas, when his heart grows bigger and bigger and bigger right at the end, that's what I feel like listening to Sandy. So my name is Charles Flowers. I did start in 2004 a magazine called Bloom for LGBT writers. And Bloom is one of my favorite words. And yes, Sandy was a loyal subscriber. And I chose, at that time, there was a lot, it was early 2000s, there was a lot of negativity around LGBT publishing. And I was working at the Academy of American Poets, and several staff members were launching journals and working with journals. And I wanted to do something for LGBT. And in today's language, I wanted to hold space for LGBT writers. And you just had to be queer, gay. The content did not necessarily have to include gayness as we understand it, but just to have the space where LGBT writers can do what they want to do. That's what I wanted to do. And I published 5 issues out of New York and 5 issues and then took a pause for 3 years while I was at Lambda Literary, and then 5 issues out of LA after Lambda Literary, which was an all-consuming job, which is wonderful. And now, Bloom will resurrect for the 3rd time in 2021. The website, oh, that's beautiful, Sandy. The website, I'll put it in the chat later, is bloomliteraryjournal.org. And so the back issues are there, and we also did chapbooks and stuff. So enough about Bloom. My other favorite use of Bloom is a poem, and I'm not going to read it today, but called Blossom, by Mary Oliver, and it's an American Primitive, her Pulitzer Prize winning book. And I have shared that poem dozens of times with people, but it is beautiful, Blossom. As Sandy says, I debuted my first book last year at 54, God bless late debuts. And The Idea of Him, published by Midsummer Night's Press, which works out of Madrid and New York with Lawrence Schimmel. And it's fantastic. And so it was but there are poems in here that stretch over 30 years. So today I'm going to read 2 poems from this and a poem that didn't go into this book because, and I'm not sure why, but it didn't go in, but well, no, I know. The poem I'm going to end with is a long poem about my mother. And this is a long poem about my mother. So I wanted to, I think, give the other poem more room, but let me, pull this up, and it's on topic. Daylilies. When my parents moved from Georgia north to Tennessee, my mother brought as much of her mother's garden as space and my father allowed. The back seat given over to short stems sunk in mayonnaise jars, 2 small bushes wrapped in damp newspapers, a shoebox of bundled seeds, and bulbs gathered in handkerchiefs. Instead of my grandmother waving from the back porch steps, my mother daydreamed of her new yard, how she would fuss over the bare lot, spray grass seed from a sack, border it with dogwood so that she could bask on the porch in a wooden swing, surrounded by color and almost feel at home. My mother struggled with her garden for years. The magnolia withered, the rocky soil too thick for its tender roots. The azaleas thrived though, the first burst of color each year, a row of pink flames against our pale yellow house. Their glory was brief in the growing heat, but by June, the daylilies had cracked their slender green seams, peeled their swollen casing back to a blaze of orange petals, splayed like an open hand. When I turned 10, my father taught me how to mow. It was September and I could practice before the grass yellowed. In my rush to please, I mistook the bloomless stalks for weeds and cut the daylilies down. My parents were watching from the garage's shadow, and I turned at my mother's cry to watch her sprint the drive. I stood shaking in the sudden hush of the machine while my mother dropped to her knees to clutch the broken stems, looking from me to the ground, to the green stains on her palms and back to me. I started crying at her tears, knowing I had hurt her somehow, guilt turning to fear that she would not stop, would not let go of the thin stalks. Years later, I realized it was the time of year that broke her, how cruel September was for her, the month she lost both parents, birthed both children. I have found my mother alone in our living room, warm and hazy with the light of late September. Sunk on her mother's red velvet divan, she absently dusts a blue glass figurine or polishes a frame, the sepia portrait carefully placed to her side. In that stillness, I see her and find myself, not in that stale room, but in this new light of my first garden, whole states from her ground. Beneath the hum of a neighbor's mower, the sprinklers whisk and scatter, her cry from the garage echoes, filling me as I sift the dirt for weeds, pat the ground above the hard knot of a bulb. Thank you. This next poem I wrote in West Hollywood. I'm live from Los Angeles, When I moved to California in 2008, I had never seen a jacaranda tree. And they're the most beautiful tree in the world, I think. They're purple. Who ever heard of a purple tree? I was just mesmerized. And so I lived on this a few years ago. I was living on the street where they had mini jacaranda. It was May. I had Sondheim in my head. And this is what happened. So, jacaranda. It's late May and jacaranda petals cover Kings Road. Small purple blossoms across the asphalt and sidewalks, each car's shine blotted and stained. Yet their beauty cannot be denied. On my first encounter with their purple light, I fell into the land of Dr. Seuss, where bright trees and a talking cat can teach a boy a lesson. Imagine myself in a forest of purple. I wish, where melancholy Sondheim songs sing to me. I wish more than anything, and I am back in Tennessee, finding my mother alone on our screened porch, listening to the summer night and the heart's litany. To be single, to be married, to have a child. My heart was just beginning to dream its own tale, a prince to rescue me from a Baptist dragon. I wish. Today, a purple tree and plangent show tune remind me how the heart endures. Its chorus of desire never abandons me, season after season. I forgot to say there were a couple of poems in the book where I insert song lyrics, obviously, and I forgot to set that up, but that was me attempting to sing one of the songs in Into the Woods. My last poem is called Easter. I'll take a sip of water, excuse me, just a moment. Thank you everyone for coming. And Sandra, was so happy to hear you reach the 1 year mark on Cultivating Voices, because having started things, that's such an accomplishment to keep it going, and through thick and thin and pandemic and everything, and just that's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. So, Easter. Empty for 6 months, my mother's house straddles a yard, untended all winter. The driveway carpeted with pine needles, her flower beds unlovely with weed. My sister and I focus on the work to be done. The painted trim mottled like skin, the endless debris of the garage, the stale and unused linens. We open every window to the April chill, then move through the house without speaking, as if the rooms will whisper and answer. We cannot imagine giving anything away, yet we know the choices will come. Who will take the piano neither of us can play? No need to empty the house until a buyer is found, yet we cannot resist packing specific emblems of her. A ceramic bowl she made to match a bedspread. An inscribed bowling ball she won at an amateur tournament with my father in the 60s, her yellowing bowling shoes tucked into the carrying case. Outside, we've hired Daryl, the boy who mowed the lawn after my father's passing, who speaks softly of my mother, who flirted with him, teasing him about his new belly of the newly married, as she stood in the yard watering her daylilies. We stay inside and begin our silent industry of grief. We are the orphaned who work late and alone into the soft Georgia night, each with our separate tasks and memories. In every surface I dust, I see my mother's face, my own brown eyes, hear her laugh rising above the roaring vacuum as my sister roams the house, tireless and afraid to slow down, to catch her face in my mother's mirrors. Kneeling, we wonder at the miracle of Clorox, which removes, as promised, the brown stain of blood from the bathroom carpet, where our mother had fallen and remained until my uncle entered the still house to find her, collapse, her blood strewn across the room like petals. On the third day, it is finished. A for sale sign beckons any and all to the swept front steps. As we drive to the airport, my sister confesses she wants a child. In our last moments before my flight, we embrace in the presence of strangers. And we weep for our bodies and for the small mystery of a child unfurling its tight bud within her. And I'm amazed by the violence of grief, how some days are sheared by memory, a mother's face transfigured by rage and vodka, the same face stoic and darkened by tinted glass, a solitary figure in a boarding lounge, watching my plane withdraw. Long after she has lost my face to the row of windows, yet I can still see her, face wet from tears, inconsolable and risen. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so very much, Charles Flowers, on our blooming day to get us started. Just beautiful. I can't wait for you to return for our new book showcase reading. And as always, thank you for all that you have done in your advocacy of poets in the LGBTQ community and poets in general. I'm so looking forward to the Bloom revival. Well, next we have a person who is also no stranger to all of you. To me, Ports Parsons is also the epitome of Bloom. I mean, that's what it's about today. You know, she has been a stalwart member of Cultivating Voices since its beginnings last year, just supporting everyone, you know, really just, you know, planting seeds and nurturing growth, and helping to cultivate voices and bring people to the platform. She is also an exquisite, avid gardener, and she brings that to her poetry. So now to the formal bio. Ports Parsons has been a professor, public school teacher, and librarian. Now she grows vegetables and flowers near Shenandoah National Park and listens for poems. Her work appears in many journals, soon forthcoming in Cider Press Review and Banyan Review. And she is the consummate volunteer for Cultivating Voices live poetry. Would you please give a very, very warm Bloom welcome to Ports Parsons and a big thank you for her work.
Wow, thank you, Sandy. It is just amazing to hear those poems, Charles. I'm in awe. I love the theme of inherited gardens, which is going to come up in my work as well. I'd like to begin today with a poem with gratitude to Tave Nice. It's going to be forthcoming in the Banyan Review this summer. The title is called Cicatrice, which is an unusual word. It means the mark or scar of a healed wound or burn. Cicatrice. The odd configuration caught my eye as I knelt and weeded the fence line. A Chinese mantis was clasping a small body, head and throat already consumed. Summer lunch in the garden after silent prayer. Triangular head down, metronome of the mandibles, a bucolic horror. The entree, ruby-throated hummingbird. I couldn't tell if the bird were male or female. Her throat would have been milky white for hiding among leaf shadows, or if his, shimmering red for flashing, dancing arcs of display. Cardinal vines exploded across that section of fence, chorus of trumpets praising the sun, and the hunter was well hid. I planted those vines to attract and feed the hummers, but now see what I had wrought? Put on bright colors, decorate with blossoms, look over the shoulder with raised eyes and ask the ancient question. Hope the desired will approach, partake, return again, and stay. I hoped to be delicious, sustaining as manna, a promised land. If the answer was yes, then we each would take a long, deep drink. Sometimes you dine, sometimes you offer the dish. The female mantis goes so far as to eat the head of her mate. Fillet the self, crack open the carapace and reveal the earnest, insistent, wriggling mess. Moles, scars, wet mouth of want, teeming dreams of love so long sought. That day in the garden, I inched closer, and she raised her head, skewered me with compound eyes, then deftly stilled herself on the tender vine, holding tight to the uneaten half. I stood there, transfixed by reality's pin. Now I look down into the December garden, the beds all cleaned and the fences bare, an egg sack clinging to a dogwood branch. A familiar pain comes back, just here, under skin and bone, the old ache below flesh, once so hungrily consumed, echo of a long healed wound, a cicatrice, the ghost of the girl I used to be. Thank you. And thank you, Tave. I'm so excited to be part of Banyan Review. This next poem is very much about inherited gardens and how they carry messages from our ancestors, across time. And it's called The Daily Subtraction of Grief. And here it is. Turn my back to the sun to bring the scissors into focus, then cut 5 peonies and 1 bud from the lowest branches of the same plant, which grew in the backyard for 47 years. Before that, who knows how long, many decades by Aunt Minnie's front porch. Make the cuts about 10 inches down the stem to fill the old vase which sat on grandmother's console beside her collection of 6 brass bells. Don't try to count the petals. Soft white, surrounding finite pink centers, marked with 3 bright stigmas like a trinity of mama's red lipsticks. So many more flowers were transposed from the home place, but today, just pick these. It's impossible to calculate how long their presence will carry me over, or the number of times I will bring my face down to the peonies to solve for a fragrance equal to the missing total of my mother's ceaseless heart. So gardens and gardening come down the generations through my family, and today this is a very old poem, but I want to read it for my sister, my oldest sister, of the 2 sisters I have and love and cherish. This is called I Watch My Sister Harvest Lavender, and it is for you, Terry. She sits at the edge of her porch, curved over the plants, her bare feet on the cool grass, the hot sun shining on her shoulders, the curling brown of her hair, her cheekbones finely angled as a deer's. She stops to sip her coffee, her garden spreading around her, the daylilies raising their skirts to the sky. Suddenly, I see her as if I were again 6 and she 17, that kind of hero worship. I watch her through the white, hot blanket of light, a camera's flash, and all the images of the past transposed pentimento. The lavender is thick with bees. She gathers a few stems in her left hand and snips with her right. The bees circle the blossoms, rise and fall all around her. the gray boards of the hot porch beneath me, a watery wind in the trees. She scatters the stems in her large brown basket and takes another sip of coffee. She turns to me and laughs, tells me she's lucky. I think, you taught me how to swim. You walked with me across a snow-crusted field. Your body swayed before me, shaping into a woman's. You cupped a wildflower in your palm and gave me its name. She turns back to her task this morning's prayer, and her hands move through the purple blue, the yellow black. She explains how she leaves some, in part for the bees, in part for herself, until new buds grow and fill out with flowers once more. She leans into the light. The light leads me to her hands, and her hands teach me how to harvest despite the danger, the necessary chance of a sting. Thank you, Sandy. So I'd like to read two more poems if I have time. One is fairly new, and it's about the time period in a girl's life when she begins to bud, and that sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not. And it certainly changes things forever. So this is called Mermaid Summer. I found it cleaning out the cedar chest, at least 12 inches of my ponytail, held by a pink band, thick, sinuous, and silky, as it slipped the plastic bag, streaked white and gold with chlorine and sun. From the ocean to the pool to the shower and back again, water was my element that summer. Camped on the hot sand at Rodanthe, my mother read novels under her hat, my father fished from the pier, and my sister studied her tan lines and sneaked kisses behind the dunes with the manager's son. I just avoided land. I was 8. I tried to hold my breath and look up through ripples to the sky, practiced dolphin maneuvers in the deep end, slowly released each pearl of air, floated my compact body with arms outstretched, at home inside my skin, my belly relaxed. I learned to jump incoming waves, then bob among the swells, a sand crab feeding, a jellyfish drifting here and there. I let human voices wash away, listened for songs from underwater caves. When I clambered out, savoring the pull of my hair streaming down my back, I walked to the bathhouse to shower, laid down on the stall floor to feel the pattering like soft rain, pretended my long tail stretched, sleek and strong, glinting blue and green. How deep could I dive? How far could I swim? How long could I stay under, supple, uncontained, and glimmering? But the next year, my breasts began to bud. By 10, my blood began to run. I learned new meanings of the word shame. I told my mother I wanted my hair cut off. I didn't know she tucked it away. Sometimes now when I can't sleep, my mind spins like the churning inside a wave. I conjure myself a secret cave on a high cliff. I can see the empty beach for miles. I enter and step down stone stairs to a pool, warm and dark, where I can steep as water laps the walls and bubbles rise from a spring far below. And then I stretch and turn and become myself again and flex my shimmering tail. Thank you, you guys, so much for letting me be with you today and to share this poetry with you. And I'd like to end with one that's a little bit irreverent. It mentions Easter, but it's really about desire and love. So romantic, sensual love in the produce section. And thank you so much. And I'll share, I don't have a website, but I did have a piece come out this winter that tells a little bit about my writing history and so on and so forth. And I'll share that in the chat later, but thank you all. In the produce section. The Easter lilies trumpet over the vegetables. I take your hand, pull you to them, open the petals, lift the stamen, and the golden yellow pollen stains my fingers. Look, I say, see how ready? We smile, no fear, no sadness, only this. We eat good food, we walk through town, stop under a cloud of white blossoms. Finally, inside, we spell words with our clothes. S is for shy, I whisper as I slip off my stockings. Outside, purple tulips lift to a white moon. Your hand tells me here is the center. Equal bodies, soft slapping of bellies, kisses, kisses like sleep, and then sleep. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kim Ports Parsons, on our Bloom reading. Well, I can't help but think that wherever anyone is on the gender spectrum, that they could not relate to that last line in your poem, their first poem, the girl I used to be. It certainly took me places. And also, I'd be remiss if I said I didn't get a little bit nostalgic for the peonies and moonflowers that we shared in Lincoln, Nebraska. Thank you, my dear sister. Well, from my Nebraska sister to a salmon sister. When I think of Eileen Sheehan's poetry, again, I can't help but think of how absolutely deep, deep rooted it is. It is lush and rooted underneath something, the mystery of something that is awaiting to burst forth and break through the surface. It's an experience always to hear her read, and I'm thrilled that she's with us today. Here's a little bit more on the formal side. Eileen Sheehan is from County Kerry, and she lives in Killarney. She is the author of 3 collections: Song of the Midnight Fox, Down the Sunlit Hall, and her newest collection, The Narrow Way of Souls, all from salmon poetry. She has read at festivals in Ireland and around the world and has been published in such anthologies as The Watchful Heart, A New Generation of Irish Poets, and The Deep Heart's Core, Irish Poets Revisit a Touchstone. One of her poems is on the Leaving Certificate English syllabus of 2019 through 2022. Always a wonder to wonder what Eileen is going to share with us. Welcome and thank you for being here. on our Bloom reading.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for your, as usual, wonderful, warm welcome, and to Kim. And it's just lovely to be back again on Cultivating Voices. I'm going to start by reading a little poem, which has no flower in it at all. It's about the blooming of light, really. And it's not by me, it's by one of my favorite poems. I always like to honor some poet that I admire. So this is by a poet from Newcastle West in County Limerick called Michael Hartnett. And here we're celebrating as well, of course, the coming of spring in Ireland, and we're not long past the vernal equinox. So this is a poem, and we'd have no blooms without the light. So whom I ask for no gift, whom I thank for all things. This is the morning, night is gone, a dawn comes up in birds and sounds of the city. There will be light to live by, things to see. My eyes will lift to where the sun in vermilion sits, and I will love and have pity. And that's from, it appears as the little frontis poem in his collected poems from the Gallery Press. It originally appeared, it's untitled, and originally appeared as part of a sequence called Secular Prayers. We're celebrating Easter in Ireland as well. My mother was an avid gardener, and actually, I think, like, I love Charles's poem and Kim's about the inherited gardens. And it gave me a little job, because I have quite a lot of my mother's plants, but I've never thought of it as that inherited garden. So I have a little job to do now. I need to write something about that. My mother wasn't at all religious, which was unusual for a woman of her generation in good Catholic Ireland. And the first time I ever saw her with rosary beads was when she was actually laid out. And I think I wrote this poem as a kind of a redress for that, because it seemed really odd. I couldn't stop looking at him thinking they shouldn't really be there, as irreverent as that might sound. I think she would have been laughing at it as well. She had a good sense of humor. She would have much preferred a bunch of flowers or something like that. I texted a friend of mine yesterday when I was trying to get a list for today, and I said, please tell me, do I have any poems where people don't die? And he texted back and he said, it's okay, you usually resurrect them all again. So that's a kind of blooming. So here's a resurrection poem. To keep. The undertaker asks discreetly if I'd like to have your wedding band to keep. But I could not take the ring that has weathered on your hand for over 50 years. I look at your crossed hands, threaded with unaccustomed rosary beads, your nails neatly trimmed, your skin pale, your ring there where it belongs. I notice your finger is slender as a girl's, and my father, always early for everything, is marking time by leaning on the 5-bar gate, and you are smoothing back the flying tendrils of your hair and running to meet him. I always think of my birthday. It's close to my birthday. It's not just yet, it's next month. And I love this time of year here because everything is waking up, and any of you who've been in Ireland sort of from this time of year to the summer will know that we have these wonderful long daylight hours, and it can be bright up to 10 o'clock at night, and it's just magical. We suffer for it in the summer or in the winter when it's like dark at about 4 in the afternoon. So the coming of light is the biggest blossoming for us, I think, here every year. And so when my birthday is here, it's always bright. It's lovely. So here's a poem, I suppose, about birth, because we go through so many births and phases in our lives, don't we? So this is a birth poem on my actual birthday. A day is so perfect. There is nothing that I want except to lie here with the sunlight warming my skin till the whole world is spinning and I'm spinning within it. And I'm back where a man with dark hair, waist deep in the river, is checking his watch and counting the minutes to home. And not far away is a woman who steps into the yard as she shakes out her apron, her red hair aflame in the sun. And soon he is home and he smells of the river and her kitchen is smelling of bread. There's a meal that they share and no one is counting. And now they are sleeping. They don't know my name or the least thing about me. They don't even know I am here. I am here. I am something nestled inside her, my mother. A pattern just formed, a space newly filled. Finally, it is all making sense. Maybe none of it happened like this. I am writing a myth as I stand to go back in the house. The grass is sprinkled with buttercups, daisies. Swallows are claiming the air. My son is building a castle from sand. My daughter turns perfect cartwheels the full width of the garden. Thank you. This one actually has a flower in the title, so it's more on point. But things die in this as well, so you'll have to forgive me that. This is dedicated to a wonderful artist, Helena McMahon, who's also from County Limerick. And this was her theory. This poem is about fuchsia. I think it's a pretty worldwide plant. It's not native to Ireland, but it's really gone native here, and particularly in the west of Ireland and Cork, East Cork. It's really gone wild in the hedges, and it's just the most amazing sight in the summer. And Helena, my friend, always had this theory. She used to always say, women are like fuchsia, you know, no matter what you do to them, they keep coming back. I think that's true of all of us, women or men or anyone really, but so this is for Helena. Oh yeah, just one other thing, there's a little reference. In the Irish language, fuchsia is called Jora Day, which means God's tears. An artist's theory of fuchsia for Helena McMahon. On a night when the moon swallowed her, she saw globs of shorn blossoms pooling on the road, the exposed twigs splintering like bone. Even God was crying. On a night when the moon spat her out, she sensed a greenness moving upwards through the hedges, new shoots pushing out from deeper down. Even God was healing. On certain days, the artist paints fuchsias in their twirling skirts to honor girls whose spirits bloom like this. Her God dances. Okay, I'm going to finish with this one, which has lots of plants in it. I live in an area, Killarney is quite famous for, there's lots of blossoms and flowers here, but it's really famous for its woodlands, and we have some of the last native oak woodlands in Ireland, and we're a temperate climate, so we have like deciduous trees, and because we're very wet as well, we have a lot of smaller plants blooming, and I often, when I walk in the woods, they're somehow the ones I take notice of sometimes. They're not the big showy blossoms, but they're blooming still. This poem actually was published recently in Days of Clear Light, which is in honor of Jessie Lendenny and Salmon Poetry, and I know Sandy has a poem in there as well. And it was published just last week as well. It was republished by a wonderful magazine based in Dublin called Ithaca, with translation into Romanian by Emmanuel Pope. So thanks to Viorel and everyone at Ithaca magazine. And this is called Deciduous. There was a girl, and the path through the woods was the only path. It was winter, and the scene was clean and all verticals. Serious green to grey to softer grey, and lines of solid black, dexter and sinister, future and past unknowable. Trees sang the story of trees, their long shadows. Her hands on the skin of a tree, scarred like her knee and warm to her touch, dark fissures for beetles to nest in, silver scribble of lichen displaying a traceable lexicon, acid and alkali, squidgy green moss to the north side. Yellow lichens sang the story of air, its pure components. She stood at the base of the tree and grounded. Her feet where small creatures burrowed and foraged, debris of autumn rotting down into earth, leaf mold and carcass, reduction happening so quietly, and the floor sang the story of fungus, its insatiable hunger. And the path from the woods was the right path, footstep and footstep, and the girl sang the story of trees, the story of air, sang the story of hunger, with the trees at attention. And the woods sang the song of a child. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
You know, every time I'm left speechless, honestly. Incredible work. And I could not be more grateful than to share a Zoom screen with you anytime I get to. Thank you for that exquisite poetry and how you bring it forth. I'm divine is the word I have today. Divine is the word I have today. Slancheva. Well, we go from Killarney all the way across the pond, all the way across the continental United States, right up the road from me here in Olympia, Washington, to Seattle, Washington, where another one of my sisters, my Poets on the Coast sisters, is joining us kind of in the bloom of the debut of her first collection that she shared with us in January. And again, when I thought of how could you not invite someone whose book is called Postcards from the Lilac City? One must. So I bring you my dear friend, Mary Ellen Talley today. And Mary Ellen Talley is a former speech language pathologist, and her poems have appeared widely in publications, including Raven Chronicles, Flatbush Review, and Banshee, as well as in several poetry anthologies. She has very deep roots herself in Ireland, has visited salmon poetry, very connected, well connected. Her poems have also received 2 Pushcart nominations. And she is a devoted poetry citizen, writing book reviews. And they have appeared online and in print in such journals as Compulsive Reader, Crab Creek Review, Entropy, Sugar House Review, and Empty Mirror. Her chapbook. And my only regret is I could not unearth it. I haven't been here long enough to get all my books organized again to flash it up. So please put it up. Her chapbook, Postcards from the Lilac City, was published in 2020 by Finishing Line Press. Please welcome Mary Ellen Talley.
Thank you, Sandy. And thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone for coming. I wrote this poem before visiting Ireland. Endangered Plants of Ireland, County Wexford. To think during joy of its ending, where bog orchids used to grow wild, to bury bones on a bright day where narrow-leaved helleborine grew, to gather treasure from the homestead in Dunganstown where serrated wintergreen drank soil, to seize clear-headed from vibrant fields the one spoiler where green-winged orchids bent, to close the door of the caretaker's cottage near melancholy thistle spreading, would trample too many wishes. Marvel the roses at Our Lady's Island near Kerry lilies, almost gone. And the next poem I wrote after visiting Ireland. From Fuchsia Hedgerows. If I could bring Ireland to my home, Seattle, I would plant a trinity of fuchsia bushes and surround my yard not with a wooden fence, but with stone walls short enough to exchange staples of friendship with my neighbors. I would line my driveway with a hedgerow of fuchsia, making that exit narrow as the roads of County Kerry. I would live long enough for walls to grow covers of moss and brambles, wear long work gloves to protect my arms, and come outside daily, removing my gloves to linger, rest my fingers under scores of pink and purple blossoms. The next 2 poems are from my chapbook, Postcards from the Lilac City, published by Finishing Line Press in October. It's called Saving Lilacs, and it's narrow and weaves down the page. Spent blossoms continue to radiate lilac aldehyde. Petals shrivel their curved foursome. Green sprigs droop, drop. Green leaves sparkle shine from waterfall on woody branches beside a porch, beside a door. You offer all that is left to bring inside me. And this one is a prose poem, Occupation of Lilacs, after Gertrude Stein. Lavender is lavender, cupped blossoms spreading cone-shaped green leaves, soft, full bush lavender, lilac. I stand near their fan, inhale simple regalia on the steps of my porch. Leo, dead neighbor, Leo, dug up 2 lilac trees 15 years ago, gave them away to bring spring smells beside our front porch. I pause to breathe in fragrance on the steps without touching, lean close, almost touching. Brown tinge will come too soon, impinge upon the edge of luminous lilac. Let it become brown, burn, die, flower too soon. Keep now inhaling all the days of the bloom until breathing in loses the scent that stops me on the gray steps of my porch. Blossoms bending over the white railing. I stop for one more perfect perfume. I keep inhaling. Thank you. And this poem is more about people blooming. It was published in a Van Gogh anthology. The teen with Down syndrome volunteers to teach art history to the speech language pathologist, me. Stray threads of words she cannot read. She walks the high school halls, clutching her dad's thick book of Van Gogh's glossy paintings. Sachets past my office, and I invite her in with other students to point out landscape, horizon, portrait, indigo swirl and curve. The olive trees, wheat field with cypresses, rose bush in blossom. What he saw outside the window. Show the master's self-portrait, straw hat, or guess at instructions on surgical dressing, as if we're all able to sort the several starry nights. She heads downstairs to show her art teacher Van Gogh's famous colors. Same as if she's off to take a trip because she says she wants her own bedroom at Arles. Lavender walls to soothe jitters. The red faded, and now the room looks blue. Sunflowers and cadmium orange sunshine at the window. Her several reproductions, one a day she copies his fierce flowering, cochineal lake, vermilion highlight, squeezed tube of French ultramarine on bumpy jute. He, ever spending the brain down to the last guilder, for paint tastes so delicious, although Theo implies it's self-defeating. As if in straw hat jaunt, she heads toward her bus, holding a thick-stemmed yellow daffodil, flipping it across her body to the right with one footstep, and to the left with the next. Van Gogh asks if it's edible. She says a flower's not for eating. If he loves the color, swallow sunshine, ride a bike with wide tires down a pebble path to jump on the big wheel, watch the wide North Sea. She says to face your fears. Colored lights shine their variants on the night sky palette. And my last poem, had to include it because it's all flowers. I wrote it in conjunction with art appreciation lessons that I did with my granddaughter's second grade class when we were studying Georgia O'Keeffe. Ode to my favorite flower. Do I have to choose a favorite? It's like asking mom or dad or grandpa, grandma to select a favorite child. Each flower is amazing in a different way, by sight or touch or smell. Look at that soft petal in white or ivory, broad leaf pink, blue, purple hues, short-lived or long-lasting. Some buds short at night, tight at night, bursting humongous blossoms come daylight. Interior yellow, stretching out to red, two-colored duo. See them long spindly or short squat stems, inches close to dirt or worm. The garden is a profusion. I walk market stalls where vendors wrap their freshly picked parade in a corridor of bright colors. No, 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 I refuse to choose. Phlox, tulip, rose, iris, daisy, daffodil, jasmine, lupin, lavender, lilac, lady slipper, orchid, crocus, buttercup, pansy, peony, primrose, petunia, periwinkle, sunflower, marigold, hothouse lily, hydrangea, hibiscus, angel's trumpet, azalea, all the way to zinnia. They dance in pirouette and grand jeté. My eyes dance. The beauty does not end. I refuse to choose. Thank you, Sandy, and thank you everyone for listening.
Someone had to do it. Someone had to say as many names of flowers as possible. Thank you for being the person who brought the true bloom to the word bloom today. It's fantastic. Oh my gosh, how wonderful. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Well, our final featured reader, before we head on over to the open mic, which I saw who's on the open mic, and ooh, wow, that's pretty exciting. Our final featured reader is Gustavo Hernandez, and I like to tell the story, a brief story. Sometimes I go to readings of poets that I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know. And this was the case. I went to a reading and there was Gustavo reading his poetry. And I was spellbound. And as I'm sometimes want to do, I will reach out to that person and say, hey, I'm the host of a reading series. Would you be interested in coming to read? And then it turned out we also appeared together in Mark Ward's amazing journal, Impossible Archetype. And so it felt like kismet that we connected, and that now we all will be able to benefit to hear your fabulous poetry, which frankly, I don't know how I was living without it before then, but now I don't have to think about that anymore. Well, here is the more formal biography. Gustavo Hernandez is the author of Flower Brand First from Moontide Press 2021. So yes, folks, be looking forward to a new book showcase reading with Gustavo. As well as Form His Arms from Ghost City Press 2020. Gustavo was born in Jalisco, Mexico, and now lives in Southern California. A very, very warm welcome on your debut on Cultivating Voices live poetry. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, I want to say thanks to Sandy and the Cultivating Voices team. I'm so honored to be here. The one thing that I did not expect is, because you never know what to expect from a reading, but I am stunned at the poetry today. Beautiful, gorgeous. Like I was just gasping the whole time, each and every one of you. I'm honored. I am so honored. So without further ado, we have a couple more gardens to cover today. So I'll get started. The first poem I'm reading is called Flecha Amarilla. My dad liked to tell a story about how I once ended up on the floor mat of his truck for looking over the dashboard. I like to call out all the Jalisco bus lines, the riders and their public pilgrimages, roads stretched to noon, to night, to roads. In a new country, he'd teach me to watch my speed, to only drive when necessary, the danger of blind spots, of eagerness. I liked the landscape and its crisscross brush of green that slowly warmed once all the horses had begun to graze and the night hawks slept. Thank you. This next poem is called Baudelia, and it's about my aunt. Grand Mal seizures. My guess it was my tia Baudelia's burden, all of these decades later, from what my mother tells me. All of her life in Jalisco at the foot of a plateau, some wilderness, in the disadvantage of an era, to us now the disadvantage of old time. In an adobe house, in the mist, el gran mal. When my grandmother died, her daughters thought they saw the source of her cancer take the shape of an owl and fly into the dry moonlit ruffle of a guamuchil. In town, depressed women were explained by poison fed to them in food flavored with envy or by the hands of jilted lovers. But Baudelia was different. What ill will could befall someone who lived clutching her mother's rebozo her entire life? A sickness, a sadness, poor child, poor girl, poor woman. I guess at her half living in a stasis. I paint joy in the warm dirt patios of spring, ear to a rustle and glint of a finch song in the Noche Buena, the warmth of the stone oven in her parents' kitchen, the blossoms of her sister's fortunes. My mother says when I was born, she asked to hold me, that I felt her arms outstretching, her breath expanding. Give him to me, Lupe. I can hold him. I won't drop him. I won't get sick. Thank you. This next poem is about my mom. It's called Morning Glory. The effort of this storm would be called all across the towns of Jalisco unmatched, miraculous. But for a time, there was only its insincere and staged request for permission, slippery gray and mist. In this, she rushed to bring the cows home, a quick step up the stone-paved incline to the roosh of meadow gathered along the river. Holding out for her a little longer were the morning glories, tiny open lamps of purple and blue run through rock and custard apple tree. Across from me in her kitchen, my mother has said many times that she now feels motionless. that we seem to do nothing but move independent of her. Today, she tells a story about how she cared most for a calf who was blind in one eye, the most difficult one, angry and scared by a dark hemisphere. She tells about a storm and her voice calling out, coalescing into a roll call. Moneda, Magalona, Mariposa. She says the cattle obediently responded to their names, headed south on a muddying path, ambled toward her like children. Thank you. And this next poem is called A White Boy Apology. It was the poem that was just published in Mark Ward's Impossible Archetype with Sandy's poem, which is brilliant. I mean, what can I say? I'm a lucky guy to be among all of you. A White Boy Apology. I don't know what's going on at home, but February and rain pool on the lawn of every county school miles around, pricked and stirred gray. I am a weak glint carried through these valleys, snow on the tip of the San Gabriels, another one of California's half-mouthed phrases. A boy hanging out with girls born in the foxglove of only one landscape. They all say origins don't have to matter, that now there is one set of roads. I don't know what's going on at home, where you are, mother and father, noon and dusk are indistinguishable. I don't know which pink or purple bell will spring from the ground in a month, if the songbirds are gone or if they're nesting. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm gonna give a little bit of space to our desert plants, which we know they are, dormant sometimes and you think they're one thing, but then they bloom and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? So I'm gonna take you all into the desert for this one. It's called Along the 15 near Baker. Along the 15 near Baker, a radio signal travels down a small hill carried on the winking quartz and granite. It plays a repeating segment about the Mojave, cinder cones, rattlers, the importance of cool water, the steady voice, the reminder to be careful. I remind myself of this drive with someone else. He put his left hand on my knee and wondered aloud if a Joshua tree could survive in our backyard so far south. One more thing we might try to keep alive. Just like you and I, we didn't stop for the sand in the Mojave. Just like us, we didn't need to talk so much. I mentioned these small things to you, but you're sleeping, warm under your own weight, breathing out your own significance. Thank you. All right. This poem is called Santiago Canyon. One summer, your granddaughter said I'd never grow old because I still wore shorts and my socks up to mid-calf. But I was 38 in summer school up on a hill you tended to before you got sick, before all we didn't make in this country began to turn on us. On the way there, I distracted myself with the star thistle, the odd poppy, the lots I remembered you cleared. In class, I befriended two young girls, and they were kind enough to see me out. I mentioned them once at your table, told you their stories, their pressures. But I want to explain this to you again, Appa. How I blurred my vision and imagined those slopes were our country's agave fields, slopes and slopes of that crocodile lotus. How I hadn't gotten old. How those beautiful girls quietly walked out of class, mats under their arms, and how the mats rolled out into the orange and sage pressed into the air. Summer, the last one with you. How I felt their prayers mantle every one of your promises to me. Bless each of the steps you took here, cloak and float the things that I'd had left, that I'd been fortunate enough to keep for this long, into the sky. How it was a ceremony, how their arms held me when it was over, when you were gone, when I came back to them full of acknowledgement and oaken with age. Thank you. I have 3 more short poems. The first poem is called Flor de Albahaca 1, and Flor de Albahaca means basil flower. With her hands in the mint and rue, she recalls a large basil bush in Jalisco, a gift from a compadre, one of many fathers whose children were carried to the baptismal pool in my parents' arms. Oh, wealth isn't always money. We were well liked, so many godchildren. Scattered now. Think of a stem growing north and a bloom spreading. Chicago, Texas, Arizona, California. How many of them called when he died? She goes through the list. And thank you. Here's Flor de Albahaca 2. With her hands in the mint and rue, she recalls a large basil bush in Jalisco and tells me she's never had much luck with it here. It's supposed to be good luck, and it never seems to take. Next to the roses, among the snapdragons, planted with gardenia or sown with impatiens. Away from the planters my father built her, I pull money from my pocket, leave a tie and jacket in the car, buy and throw 5 packets of seed into a small glazed pot of dark soil I also paid for, to show her what this place has taught me about luck. Thank you. And this last poem is called The Hereafter. Thanks again for listening, everyone. It's been a wonderful afternoon. I'm so happy. Thank you. The hereafter is like everything around me, built by my father, his feet in wood frames full of mud and straw, comically slowed down by that strange small dog who ran ahead to be his companion. Of course, there are bean sprouts growing below the corn stalks, fields of wild tuberose, and the boulder ledges of our river, the night filled with oil lamp bright, noon songs incomplete without some light radio static. It will always be Jalisco. I'll just go out and say it. Say that those who are mine adjust not to an ascent as much as a return. After all of our years, we finally set out toward the right horizon. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, muchas gracias, Gustavo. Oh, the book, the new book, debut collection, full collection, debut full collection, Flower Grand First. You can see it right there in the background, beautifully displayed. I love your display. I'll look forward to the next time you join us here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. I told Kim Ports Parsons in the private chat, which of course will show up if we publish it, like I am like completely like just swooning from all the bloom, all the nectar, all of it, amazing. Well, we're gonna go to the open mic now. But before I do, I want to give one more, how about we just unmute for a moment, stretch our mute muscles and give a round of hoot and holler for our featured readers today, our bloom readers, Charles Flowers, Kim Ports Parsons, Eileen Sheehan, Mary Ellen Talley, and we closed out with Gustavo Hernandez.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Ah! Woo.
Great. It was such a beautiful reading, y'all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hello, world.
Hello.
Good to hear all your voices. I'm going to hear a few more now in the live open mic portion on Bloom. And if you wouldn't mind now remuting, thank you so much, everybody. Well, we're going to go with we're going to go with 8 readers because of time, and we've got a beautiful array of them joining us from all over. So thank you so much for coming today, tonight, early morning for joining us on the open mic for our balloon reading. And I am still hearing a little bit of feedback. There I go. Okay, got it. Well, in the open mic, what I'd like to say about the open mic is that on any given open mic, the open mic folks have been, should be, and will become easily our featured readers at some point. They are very interchangeable, but we love that we can always do a little bit of bonus round with some of our readings to hear as many voices as possible. A reminder that it's just one poem, my friends, up to 3 minutes. And please respect that so that we don't all wear ourselves out on Zoom too much today and can move forward with however much of the day, evening, morning we have ahead of us for whatever purposes. Well, I am absolutely gobstopped, as they say, to welcome our first poet joining us tonight from Limerick, Ireland. I miss you a lot and I can't wait to see you. Please welcome Lou Galvin.
Thanks, Andy. I miss you loads and I love you. Hope you always know that.
I love you.
One day took a world away. A combination of peace and exuberance and newly bloomed flowers taller than my own growth. I started to falter come November, nothing to look out my window for. The 20-foot day told her away. In different shades of light and matching the shade of the sun and all the Irish fairies around your garden. In the shape of a small child scared, you must convince yourself your shadow is worth following. But I can assure you that she will always adore you. In all the sweet days of mornings, us two are passing ships. Only one can make it to shore. Only one set of footprints, no longer fingers pressed in clay or laughter in the rain. Once a giant ship in arm's reach away. As I sit and watch from the bay, mumble goodbyes and painful sobs, remember what they say.
You're on mute.
Lou, you hit the mute. Hit the mute, Lou. Yeah, unmute and pick up again.
Remember what they say, from us she is gone. But there are others waiting for a revival. There are others waiting, and they'll celebrate and shout, here she comes. With open arms and love and life. You never know her open eyes, but I know you know the color. But if you cry, you must silently cry, because you got to hold her. And you still give life to a tiny being that knows you're always her mother. You kissed her forehead knowing the immensity of her worth, because stillbirth is birth still. Thank you.
Oh, you know how much I love you, and I cannot wait till we're back in the copper room.
I love you too.
Together.
We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Lou Galvin, my friends. Lou Galvin, who, if I didn't meet Lou Galvin on a night at the Buttery in Limerick, I think it's a safe bet that I would not be sitting here today, because that magical evening there in 2016 kind of set things in motion. So glad we met. Well, next on the open mic is another person who I'm definitely glad that I met, but I've only met now on our screens, and yet it is no less magnanimous. Would you always so grateful to you, Amit Dahiyabadshah to join us very, very early in the morning from New Delhi. Thank you.
Hi, Sandy. Hello, family. I want to do a little experiment, if you don't mind, if you and Don agree, and Kim. I want you to taste my language for a change. So it's a poem that's actually written in a Acadian tongue, yeah? And so what we'll do is, if everyone will unmute, then I do a line and you do that line, but I'll do it in parts so that the words sit easily on your tongue. I just want you to taste my language, all right? But the poem is about how life and death flower in the tiger's dusk hour. I'm trying to translate it into English. How life and death flower.
Here? Let me interrupt for just
Yeah.
a minute. I think it would be better if we stay muted, because if we're unmuted, it's going to be a cacophony.
Yeah.
We're not actually going to hear each other ourselves. We're going to hear just a mess. So let you go ahead and let us say it to ourselves.
Okay. So I'll try and translate a few parts. It says, in the dusk, the champa flower falls besides a mound of perfectly round little pellets. The earthworm, great cultivator, keeps on cultivating, ignoring fragrance, ignoring beauty. Such a beautiful thing in nature is duty. And the poem about the flowering of life and death in the hour of the tiger goes like this. Suna hai koi sher guzarta hai yahan se. You know, people from my community are known for their courage because we have a big blood regiment in the Indian Army. But that's not where our courage comes from. It comes from the fact that we're all tone deaf. None of us can sing. But when we feel like singing, we always sing. And no one dares to tell us to shut up just because we're tone deaf. I'm happy now, so I must sing. Suna hai koi sher guzarta hai yahan se ki pani pe hiran khade hain pyase. संध्या के अनहद में कोई पत्ता बोला है तो आंखों के तराजू ने हिरणों को तोला है शेर और हिरण की तकदीरें मिली हैं शेर और हिरण की तकदीरें मिली हैं कि दोनों को गुथ कर कुदरत ने लिखी हैं संध्या का केसर अमावस्या का काजल शेर की शायरी करे जंगल को पागल हवन कुंड आंखों में मृगनैन पाए दर्पण हवन कुंड आंखों में मृगनैन पाए दर्पण अपनी ही आहुति का ब्रह्मांड में समर्पण हिरण की कुर्बानी पे शेर कुर्बान हिरण की कुर्बानी पे शेर कुर्बान इस भयानक सुंदरता की जय हो भगवान सुना है कोई शेर गुजरता है यहाँ से कि पानी पे हिरण खड़े हैं प्यासे. So the poem basically says that in the hour of dusk, the hour of the tiger, a dry leaf betrays his presence, and the deer stand at the water's edge, choosing between thirst and life. Nature has woven like a plait the destinies of the tiger and the deer. And the tiger celebrates the deer's offering of itself as a prayer to the law of creation. And for this terrible beauty and this sense of duty between tiger and deer, I thank you for this terrible beauty, O God. And in the hour of the dusk, a leaf betrays the flowering of the life and death in the hour of the tiger. Thank you so much for being so patient. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I am humbled by your gift today, and I welcome more poems in people's home languages. I'm very mindful from when I went to the Soviet Union in 1990, when I didn't know how to hear Russian, or I had studied it, that you hear the poetry in a home language even if you can't speak it. And it is a tremendous, tremendous gift. So thank you for bringing that today. Our tiger, Amit, thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Next, we have another stalwart of Cultivating Voices, joined us right from the beginning. We are, for those of you joining us, we are in the open mic segment, one poem, up to 3 minutes. Would you please welcome Kate Wegrzyn. And you might need to unmute, Kate.
Oh, can never find that arrow, but thank you so much. I've spent almost a year following the photography of a dear Cultivating Voices friend, Tomas, and it has inspired me days to see his photography and write. And he also posts a poem of poets I've never heard of. So I have gotten quite the education from him and from all of you. Today I will read. Hopefully I've got a timer. I won't go over. Start. Love in the time of pandemic. Off they go, letting you know how this enclave, all that, is more picturesque than the other. Retrieve into how you feel. One whisper or a lover is bound to discover your heart chamber engorged and clandestine in the gravitational pull, sitting alongside birds on the ley line. Their names echo refrain from the sky. Yet on to the ocean we go. Scallop shell symbolize the spiritual path along Camino de Santiago. Clamshell cracked open on the chest of the otter, so clever on its back, floats to dine. Spiny oyster, Sea of Cortez, harvested for food. Shell adorned since prehistory for religious significance of red and orange, and the rarest, the purple. Dolphin, the womb of the ocean, Dolphina, Ostara, on her Grecian islands, her totem, the hare, protectress of birds' nests filled with their colorful eggs that they lay. We are not shells to be tossed to the sea. Name sparks to refrain what is in a name. Delivery in tone, sound of kindness opens receptivity. Yet when you call harshly, wicked winds, spare the bellowing, no anger, or a horseshoe crab shell will resemble you. I was on time.
You did it. You did it. Thank you so much, Kate. Beautiful. And of course, shout out while I can to my dear neighbor, Thomas A. Thomas. You know, he lives here in Olympia, Washington as well. So looking forward soon to being in our in-person venue where I can actually see him in person. Well, next we have Susan Abbott, who read at the end of last month, debuted with an incredible poem, Villanelle, and I'm so glad that you are with us today in the open mic. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you, my dear. It's a pleasure to be here. And I wasn't going to read, but then when I realized the theme is bloom, and my partner of 43 years, her name was Dee Dee Bloom. And she passed away a little over 2 years ago. And I'm just now being able to write about that time. And also, I feel like having got the Villanelle is giving me permission to like have a form, because my mind is all over the place. And a Villanelle can, you know, make me rein it in a little bit. Dee Dee, my dear, she had an illness that looked like Parkinson's, but it was multiple system atrophy. And in the last year or so, she had Lewy body dementia. And she was somebody that could feel the changes in her nerves as they were happening. And anyhow, this Villanelle is in her honor, and it's a vignette from that time during her last 6 months. And it's called Inquiry. Down to bare bones, that specter of you, trying on death till it fit like a glove, asking, where should I be? What should I do? I sit at the table, sip the morning's brew, no escape from that sword looming above, down to the bare bones, that specter of you. Your appetite gone, gait shuffling your shoe, flowers fade in your hair, plucked from the grove. You ask, where should I be? What should I do? Nerves all unraveling, gone is their glue, the brain eating crow. Your heart is a dove, down to bare bones, that specter of you. Sleep, the only comfort, and dreams that ensue as death or life makes ready to move, asks, where should I be? What should I do? And now that you've left with that gone before crew, I keep to a path of this ancient love, down to bare bones, that specter of you, asking, where should I be? What should I do? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Susan, I don't know too many people that could share one Villanelle. There she is. There she is. Let alone.
I don't know if you can see in this, but she's always wore flowers in her hair. She was adopted by a Hawaiian family in the 90s, and ever since then, she just always had a headlay on. So she was the bloom of blooms.
The bloom.
Thank you
of
for
blooms.
Humoring me with this.
Today, I could not be more honored than to hold that space.
Thank you.
For you to honor your beloved.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What a wonderful, wonderful, moving variation today on the word bloom. Thank you. Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
sharing.
My pleasure.
Wow. We'll see you soon. Keep blooming. Well, next we have a poet that I happen to know is going to be in an upcoming, one of our upcoming new book showcases, probably in the early 2022. I'm very happy to see you here today. Arden Eli Hill, welcome.
Thanks, everybody. This has been an amazing reading and a great way to spend Sunday. I'm reading a poem from my chapbook, Bloodwater Parish, which is an exploration of gender, sexuality, and race and adoption in Southern Louisiana. It's forthcoming from Seven Kitchens Press in November. So this poem is called Against Birthdays, with thanks to Jan Beatty and her collection, Red Sugar. I lay swaddled in the ward with infants whose mothers held them to their breasts, whose fathers peered through the glass at sons and daughters, their wrists tagged with names and the weight of names. My parents didn't know I had been born until the second day. On the third day, the nurses handed me over. The ink had dried on the necessary papers. I was always old enough for truth, to hear the word adopted, to be told I did not come from the body of the mother who sang me to sleep. Before birth, I was rocked in the flesh of an anonymous girl. When I was old enough to understand the days between my birth and my mother's hands, between my first cry and how my father could hold me in the small hole in the crook of his arm, I thought it strange, a birthday, a party. Still, I took my cake and swallowed it. I watched the red sugar icing of my name disappear and held my breath until the ghost grew quiet. Thank you.
Arden, that was fantastic. Thank you. I can't wait. I can't wait for your book. I can't wait to hear you read again. And stay well. Be well, my dear friend. And take good care. It's funny, Red Sugar. Jan reminded me when she was reading with us, she had stolen the title for her book from a poem that I had written called Recipe for Red Sugar that I wrote in my kitchen in Lincoln, Nebraska. A little trivia for you there, Arden. We'll see you soon. Thank you. Great to hear your voice today. Well, we are down to our last two readers in our special Poet Focus on Bloom today. Would you please welcome Aaron Mason? Hello, Aaron.
Hello, thank you, everyone. This is the second poem that I've published, and the first one I might have just had my name published because that was when I was in kindergarten, and then there was a little gap between that one and this one. This was published in RFD, a queer journal, and it is called Unshaven Quest. What is it about mountain men? Burly ski bums, glowing with altitude, flannel-chested, pot-smoking post-hippies, gentle wilderness warriors. In ancient Sumer lived a hairy man who spoke to animals and knew no culture. His name was Enkidu, and goddess conspired to capture him for King Gilgamesh. Two great men, demigod ruler who lost his way, and woodsman tamed by priestess talk, wrestling in the earth, surrounded by cedars. Today, I remember the tree rooting the flag of Lebanon, the scent of pine needles, bearded man gods, jointed, jutting skyward. There, I bury my aching memory, searching for dusty future lovers, unwritten letters in lost languages, inhaling infinite specificity and sweat. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Aaron, for bringing that second published poem.
Thank you.
Keep writing. It won't be long till the next. It won't be as long till the next one.
No.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling it won't be as long.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Thank
Come
you.
back, read again. Yeah, it's great to have you here today. Well, I'm so excited for our final reader in the open mic today. One of my Poets on the Coast sisters, Kelly Lenox. Hello.
I will unmute. Okay. In the spirit of bloom, I picked a poem from my first book, which is called anyway, it's called The Brightest Rock. There we go. And this poem was inspired by a true story. It's called Voodoo Lily, which is, you may have heard, the more common variety is corpse lily, because pollinators include flies. Not just cute little bees and birds, but flies too. And this is, I guess you could say, it's about the power of nature. Voodoo Lily. The dusky dawn becomes a dark afternoon, heavy with the odor of voodoo lily. Its blossom of blackest crimson and scent of rotting flesh draw blowflies to a putrid orgy. A tuber not many would plant. So when it rises through the neighbor's ivy, the news spreads far and the curious come, fighting instinct, they force their feet closer. Not many get close enough to feel this flower's heat. Strange luck that it grew on her side of the fence, a gardener who recognized this lily, tall as she is, a large single petal dark as her own hair. After that season, the ceramics she built and fired in her basement studio grew odder and odder until no one bought them anymore. When she moved, her garage sale offered shiny purple pitchers that wouldn't pour, bumpy, leaky mugs, speckled plates, and vases that could hold no stem, just the ghost of a scent. Thank you. And what a joy to get to be part of this.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Kelly. I'm so glad that you were able to join us and come back soon and read, and be well. Thank you. Always great to be in your company. I love your readings. I love your poems. Well, our final reader today in our live open mic on this bloom, on this day of bloom, joining us from Canada is Max Vandersteen. Hello, Max.
Hi there, Sandy, and thank you so much to you and Kim for adding me to the list of this of these powerful voices today. I would like to read a very short poem to conclude our afternoon here that I wrote a couple of years ago about my love, whose favorite flower happens to be tulip. So it's called I Have Drank of Thee. I have drank of thee unquenchably, and still thee yields just as the fields of fluid towers of tulip flowers replenish themselves perennially, so too doth thee, so too doth thee unselfishly restore thine good. Each time I should partake in thou, hold false of thou, still refill thyself forgivingly. Occasionally, love, I render to thoughts of blue, wondering why thou art thou, we are we, where it ends and what will be. Yet then I thirst, and again I thirst for you. Thank you. Beautiful afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Max. Perfect closing for today. I've got the tulips right back here, blooming from the farmer's market, the daffodils ahead of, up above them, and the rabbit and some other flowers over here. Well, everybody, you today have been listening just right now to our live open mic celebrating bloom. And we heard on the open mic today, Lou Galvin, Amit Dahiyabadshah, Kate Wegrzyn, Susan Abbott, Arden Eli Hill, Aaron Mason, Kelly Lenox, and Max Vandersteen. And we began just a little under 2 hours ago with our featured Bloom readers. Wonderful. And as I like to say, the features could be the open micers could be the feature, vice versa. It all will happen. Our featured readers, Charles Flowers, editor of Bloom. Kim Ports Parsons, Eileen Sheehan, Mary Ellen Talley, and Gustavo Hernandez. I want to thank you all today, all of you, and all of you watching, for sharing your voices as we open to bloom this April. It's Poetry Month. Oh, it sure is. And here we are on this Easter Sunday, Monday for a few. Thanks again to all, and upcoming in April as we watch Poetry Month bloom. Next week, back for our new books showcase, we have none other than the co-editor of the Nasty Women anthology, Grace Bauer, reading from her new and selected Unholy Heart. April Lee Fields, reading from Wild Flower. Jules Nyquist, reading from Atomic Paradise. And Denise Duhamel with Second Story. You do not want to miss that new book showcase. And coming up on April 18th, our Sunday special with poets from Slappering Hall Press, that celebrating its 30th anniversary of publishing chapbooks. Well, enjoy your day, evening, early morning, wherever you are blooming and wherever you can find the bloom within you. Thanks to Don Krieger, Kim Ports Parsons, and as ever, my sister Elizabeth Ann for inspiring us to start cultivating voices. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Sandy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be well, everyone. Thank you for a glorious time.
Thank you for everything.